like to welcome everybody here. Appreciate everybody coming. I set the room up for twice as many as signed up, just in case we had walk-ins. So if nobody shows up after next hour, we can move. You can spread out and open up a little bit if we need to. I'd like to remind everyone that October is Family History Month, so that's good. I'd like to also introduce Corey Small Canyon, who is our guest speaker. He's are you a professor? Adjunct professor at UVU up in Orem. I met him 2 summers ago at a family history conference at BYU, and he was talking about Navajo history or Indian history there, and we got talking, and he said it would really be nice if I didn't have to have a general class to teach. So over the last year we talked about him coming down here. So what our goal is to record it and then put it out in Family Search in the Wiki, and so it can be training, and we'll make sure all the other stakes on the reservation have access to it, so they could use that as training if they so wish. So we hope it'll help people that come today to be able to do it. I'm excited. He'll show you his family tree, because I hear so many people say, well, if you're Navajo, you don't have a family tree, and Corey will prove you wrong.
So, my name's Corey Small Canyon. My mom is from Lupton, and my dad is from Navajo Mountain. And so, my mom is Sinajing, my dad is Kinkaching, and I'm married. I have 3 children. A boy who's 9, a girl who's 6, and another girl who's 2. And all of this came about Navajo genealogies just because someone asked and I didn't know. All I knew at that point was my immediate family and a couple of my aunts and uncles, my Shimasana, and that's about it. So I started asking questions, started looking and searching, and this has been going on for about 20 years now. Been doing Navajo genealogy and Native American genealogy too. And one thing I do hear is that people have a hard time finding their ancestors for a number of reasons, and I think my genealogy is a little bit different just because of some of the people in it. So it's been a little bit easier, but there's still things that are possible for people to do. So some of this is by oral, and a lot of it's backed up by documents. So this is what I've been able to find. As far as my family history goes. So here's my dad down here, Small Canyon. Here's my grandpa, Walter Small Canyon. As you can tell, he had a lot of brothers and sisters. His dad had 2 wives who were sisters, and out of the 2, they had 24. He had 24 kids. So, and so yeah, it goes back quite a ways. And since my I study history, and that's what I went into school for, and I got my degrees in. I decided to write about something that could fit in along with this, and it just so happens that there was a pretty crazy story that involves Tuba City and how it was colonized and people started living there, and it goes back to right here. You can't see the name, but when I had my firstborn son, I told my wife, do you mind if we have a family name? If I give him a family name of mine? She said, no, it doesn't matter. And she goes, well, what's his name? And I go, well, I'd rather just give it to him first than tell you. And not to offend anyone here, but because of what my ancestor did, people started calling him White Man Killer. And once she heard that, she put her foot down and said no. But his Navajo name was Atsidi, or his Anglo name was Charlie Atsidi. But there's a whole story that goes along with that. And basically, my master's thesis was saying, you know, we've heard the Anglo stories of what happened, but no one ever says anything about the Navajo side, and or the Hopis, because they're in that area too. And I said, why don't I just create a story that puts all three of these people's versions of what happened. And I found out there was a government version too, which was different from everyone else's. And so it created quite a colorful past of Tuba City and the colonizing of that area. And one thing, and I'll have this up so people can look at it later. I've been going around and teaching Native or Navajo genealogy, and I decided to hop online to FamilySearch.org to make it available, and when people would have questions, I'd just say, go to FamilySearch.org. That will get you going. That's the basics to start you off. I've had an interesting time with FamilySearch.org because it's a public domain, and so that means anyone could go in there and add things or take away things that they want to. And man, there's some interesting things people will put on there. Some guy was really adamant about the tribe that he was with on the East Coast. His tribe signed a treaty the same day that the Navajo signed a treaty. And so he said there was a conspiracy between what was going on with these two tribes that had nothing to do with each other, never met each other, and that they were switching peoples and all of this stuff. And so I always tell people, be careful what you see online, because it's open. Anyone can do whatever they want and say whatever they want, whether if it's right or wrong. And it's the same thing with FamilySearch.org. And I try to keep up to date with it, try to take out some of the stuff that doesn't belong there, because they made me kind of like an administrator for the native stuff on there. But some of the things that it goes into is some of the basic history of Navajo, the Navajos, which really ties in with how the family is going to move around throughout the different states, through New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, or Colorado. And so I always tell people to be mindful of what's going on, of where your family's from, because they might be moving around quite a bit. And a lot of my family thought that the small canyons were from the Navajo Mountain area, and always have been, but they weren't. And so that's another thing that pops up, is that to be mindful when you're doing family history. My warning is that only do it if you want to, because there's always going to be something that pops up that you might not agree with. Skeletons in the closet, stories, and I've had plenty of people get mad at me finding something out that people have been trying to hide for quite a while, or don't want to talk about. And that's just part of everyone's family. But, when I go to teach, people always are excited to do native genealogy, because I'm always at these conferences where they're learning about the latest and greatest stuff that's available. And I tell people my class is the bubble popper, because I like to pop their bubbles, because the latest and greatest isn't available for us. We have to do it the old-fashioned way. We have to go to wherever the document's located, which goes against everything that we're taught about family history today, because you just hop online and get it available online. There are stuff that's available online, but a majority of it is not online. And that's just the sad truth. Up in Provo, with the native wards up there, we've been trying to do indexing for the native censuses and whatnot, but they tell us no. So we're trying. So let's see, FamilySearch.org. When you look up Wiki Navajos, besides the history, one of the main things that people will fall back on is the censuses that are available. And I always tell people there's two types of censuses that are available. The first one is the population census, which has all the Bilaganas on it, which has been going on for quite a while. And there's the Indian censuses, and they're two separate things, and they have different rules and regulations and how those were supposed to be carried out. Sometimes the information's the same, but they're different. And so I always tell people, go look at both of them, because you can always find something new on there. In addition to that, the Indian censuses are available online at certain locations. The Indian censuses are available online, one through Ancestry.com, and it has its plus and minuses. The other is AccessGenealogy.com. Ancestry.com, if you're non-LDS, you have to pay for it. AccessGenealogy.com is a free website, so you don't have to pay to look at the censuses. And the negative about AccessGenealogy.com is that there's no search parameters, so you couldn't just put in a name and it will look it up for you. It won't do that. So you have to know what records you're looking for and where to find them. But with the Indian censuses, that shouldn't be too hard, because they're all in alphabetical order, which causes other problems too. I'll talk about later. But the other Ancestry.com, the negative about it is that they do have a search parameter. You can type in the name and it will try to look up the name. But the problem is that a majority of the people who are typing in the names are doing it to the best of their abilities, and sometimes their best isn't very good, because they'll put in wrong names and wrong spellings. And so that's one thing to keep in mind when you're searching Ancestry.com, is that the name that you're putting in, they could have put it in a different way, so it might not be bringing it up that way.
Corey, can I ask you a question? Why do they not want to index the census records? I mean, you
Yes.
said you tried. Why do they not want to do that?
Yes.
Oh, that's all you can say.
I have my theories, but that's all they are.
So who is it that doesn't want to index?
The church.
The church doesn't want to index.
So, I guess they had other priorities at the time. So, let's see.
Corey,
Yes.
on Ancestry with all those errors in there.
With all the errors?
Yeah, with all the errors. Have you ever found a way or some place that we could actually request to have some of those records corrected? I've found several.
I do believe you should be able to, right there on the spot, you can enter in your suggestion of how it should be spelled, and that's one way. And I don't know exactly what happens after you do that, whether if they look at your suggestion and compare it or not, or if it's just going to sit there as additional information of what could be. But there is, you should be able to do that right there on the screen with the name. Yes.
Or my sister indexed a lot of the records from the 1940 Navajo census when those were released. And so what she did were a lot of the Navajo names. And of course, when they're entered on the census, they're entered the best way that the individual who did the census, who took the census, did it. And we know very well that they're misspelled, and so she would put it in, obviously if there was an error, she would correct it. But past her, there are other individuals who look over the records to make sure that they're accurate. Since the census record is the legal record, then that is what they use, regardless of whether it's misspelled or not. When we went to Salt Lake to the family history, to ask them, that was a specific question she asked. She says, these are obviously wrong. If someone is looking for a record and it's not anywhere near the correct spelling, how would they know where to look?
It's not that aspect, it's because they have to keep whatever spellings on the document, because that's the way the document's provided. It's when they're trying to read handwriting. And people
And there's several, it goes through like 3 or 4 different people in order. But the best thing is if people are knowledgeable about those, but it was rather discouraging for her to think that, that she would suggest. And then the other thing is she went back in and she says, we've got another family member, not in the original, indexing document, but on Family Search. They have gone, another individual in the family has gone and corrected names and just changed them. And that's not good either.
No.
I was thinking more in terms of typographical errors. That's the one. I know.
And that's what I'm referring to is that because you can't change the document in that aspect. But yes.
Well, I'm like you. Being a student at school, and I got interested in the Hopi people.
Yes.
And I just kept asking questions and questions from the church and getting as much as I could from the church. But then, me being the only member, and I had my brothers, and they were getting involved, we went to Flagstaff and picked up as much record as we could get from the Hopi reservation, and then we went on where it got more expensive, where we wanted to get right to the bottom. We had to go to Washington, D.C., and we went to the archives, and in the archives they have the beginning of everything, and we just got down everything, and we bought their books and everything, and took it from there.
Yeah.
And we went as far back as we could, and we had to work like a puzzle, everything out. And by the time we got it all done, we got 7 generations out of that.
Yeah.
And it's expensive. It's not easy, and it takes years.
Yeah. And if people really want to, they could do the same. They could go and order the microfilm, and it's pretty expensive. And that's one of the best things that the church has done is that they have gone through and ordered quite a bit, but there's still a lot that is still out there and available. And when you look at what's available, it is kind of overwhelming because there is a lot of documents out there for genealogical purposes. And on FamilySearch.org, there's a number of things that could be, that I mention on there, that people can take a look at. Some of the basics would be schooling. I don't have a complete list, but it's a start, because there's a lot of different type of schools that became available for natives. You have your boarding schools, you have your day schools, your church and mission schools, and a couple other different type of schools that became available. And each of those entities that were in charge of those have their own records for those. And so some of those records are going to be with, if it's with the church, then it will be with the church. If it's part of the government, then it will be with the government. And that's part of the joy of having to figure out where they're located. Not only that, I remind people that there are newspapers out there, a lot of newspapers, and there's some that go pretty back into the late 1800s that are available, that do mention and have stories and obituaries about Navajos. And the church, a volunteer for the church submitted obituaries for the Navajo Times, and also for the Gallup Independent and those areas, also up in Shiprock. So those are available to people. In addition, I remind people that, yes?
I'm sorry, where are those available, those obituary lists?
Those ones are available, the church has copies of those on microfilm.
It's on microfilm.
Yes. In addition, I remind people, there's major, like I said, there's major events in Navajo history, and documents were created to help record those, or record how people thought about them, such as the Navajo Hopi land dispute. There's court records from the attorneys that were put in libraries, which required them to go to a number of people and interview them and get histories of the area, histories of the people from that area, and there's a lot of genealogical information through those. Or
Where are those court records?
depends on the lawyer.
Oh, so they're not compiled anywhere?
Well, there's some in Phoenix, and then there's some up in Salt Lake.
At the genealogy?
No, with the schools. They're also with the courthouse too.
With the respective counties, they'd be in the court records
Yes.
in the respective counties, okay.
So for the lawyer, for the Hopis, he donated all of his records to the University of Utah and to BYU. So you would just go up there and ask them to look at it. And so part of their records, I mean, there's hundreds of folders, and within each folder there's thousands of pieces of information. Yes?
Well, when I moved here, I didn't know about the history about the Hopis and the Navajos. And I met this wonderful sister, Betty Hansen, and she knew all about it because her family was living there and she was driven out. And so when I met her and she was a member of the church, she didn't we weren't too, I know she wasn't very friendly, but I was asking questions, and she was in genealogy. We became the best friends, and I found out through her, for her helping me, we went to the town that I lived in Winslow, and the newspaper. I started looking at obituaries, and then going back, and then getting the newspapers. The Winslow Mail had the dispute between the Hopis and Navajos. And I just got those newspapers, and boy, I was printing them out because there was my history.
Yep.
And then I, not only that, I said, I want to go there. I didn't live out there. But then she said, we're taking a 3-day vacation, and she drove me out on the reservation, and she showed me where her family lived, and I showed her where my great-grandparents lived, and we bonded so much that you can't imagine the wonderful person. She was very sharp, very smart, and you find people, great people that live out there or
Oh, yeah.
know about it. They can help you.
Oh, yeah.
You just have to search, just
Yep.
just keep searching.
Yep, that's right.
Corey,
Yes.
I'm interested in the obituaries that you were talking about.
Sure.
That's available on microfiche, because
Yes.
we do that in our Family History Center in Tuba. We
Mhm.
scan them and we enter it into the system. I wasn't aware that the church had those obituaries prior to when we started.
Yeah.
So if I go on FamilySearch.com, is there?
I'll give you
is
one
it-
of these flyers
Great.
here,
Okay.
and it will have that information.
Great, okay, great.
So, so yeah, I'll get people who will ask about, well, what kind of documents are available for, like the Long Walk. And they say, well, they were great at rounding up people, but they weren't great at documenting things. So there's not a whole lot of information unless it's one of the major chiefs or someone who's working for them that there'll be information about. The only information that's been documented come from 2 books. One was done by Navajo Community College back in the days, which has been published and it's widely used by a lot of people. And then there's a smaller one. Well, the first one, it's more of those who are from Arizona and a couple from New Mexico, but the second book is more for those who are from New Mexico.
It's the Wiki
The Navajo Wiki, or the FamilySearch.org Wiki, Navajo, and so I got quite a bit on there of information. I started on the Hopis, because everything that when I first started on the Navajo Wiki, it had some really generic information that that wouldn't really do much for you if you're looking for Navajo genealogy. And I found the same thing with the Hopi section. Really generic information, said if you want to learn more about it, basically go look at an encyclopedia, which if you're doing genealogy, that's not going to help at all. And so I just barely started on the Hopi section too, because there is a lot of information out there. As you guys know, it's just knowing where to find it, which is half the battle.
Well, like you were saying, as you go into this genealogy, I found out the Hopis intermarried with the Navajos.
Mhm.
And I'm finding that the Senegenies, we have intermarried with the Senegenies, and I have this family here. Her mother's Ruth, and one of my great grandparents had married into her line, and I'm dying to grab a hold of her and say, hey, I have some material here that it's so exciting.
Yeah.
You learn to love the people because we're all related.
Oh yeah.
We have that relationship, and I love the people here, and I have learned to enjoy and they've taught me so much.
Definitely.
When you said you go to get the records, where are you going? Is it the chapter? Where are they?
Where are records located?
Yeah.
That would be part of my other lecture.
Oh.
Make you sit through it all. It just depends on what you're looking for. It could be anywhere from the East Coast to the West Coast, from up north to down south. So hopefully that narrows it down. Yeah, it could be like, yeah, it really just varies on what you're looking for.
Corey, you gonna share the names of those books, Richard? The two
You said the long walk.
publications. that
it
we
should
were
be
talking
on,
about, the long walk?
It should be on the wiki. For whatever reason, my laptop's not liking the projector. So, if it's not, then I'll throw it on there.
The, oh, okay, the address for the wiki. Is that what you're
Just go to familysearch.org.
Okay.
There's going to be several tabs. One of the tabs to open up is called Wiki, W-I-K-I. And then it will have a search box for you. And just type in the word Navajo. And it will bring up any and everything associated on Wiki with Navajo. Just it's usually the first one that pops up. Just click on it. So, yeah. And yeah, I'll put the Navajo Long Walk information on there. I have a lot of different type of books that I've put on there dealing with different subjects. And I try to keep it specifically towards genealogy. But I haven't finished it.
I have a book on Navajo Mountain you might be interested in.
On where?
On Navajo Mountain in
Navajo Mountain
Yeah.
Bridge, Rainbow Bridge, and
you know, it's actually a kind of a narration of somebody's experience and the people that they met through there. It's a very interesting book. I'll have to share that with you. You might be interested in that.
yeah.
There's a lot of
sounds
Navajo
good.
names in there and families in there.
Oh,
I was just amazed at
Cool.
the experience that they went through, and it's actually the life of a young boy going through that area, and as they move across back into.
What was the name of it?
I can't remember the name of the book right now.
okay, sounds good.
Well, when you go on the reservation, they have, on different villages and different places, they have like a store, bookstore, and some of these Navajos and Hopis have gone to school and getting an education, and they have written about their people, and they put those names in there, and you start reading, and you're just picking them up, and it's exciting because the Book of the Hopis, when that was written, they had some Harvard University students came on the reservation, and they sat down in a village and took their names, the people that were living in different villages there. And my mother's name was on there, and her family's name was on there. And I just started picking up books and getting all those names and putting them in my records, and then I just had an apple box. And I had my apple box full. And so when I saw Betty, I said, I've been collecting this for 40 years. Can you help me? And she took that box, and she worked here at the genealogy room, and she went back 7 generations for me. And you can find them. You just collect those names, those people that are important, chiefs or people that talk about these people on the reservation. There must have been very important people, and if you find out you're related to them, you better collect their name. I think those names are so important.
So I finally got it, yay! This class is about to get over. So, yeah. So this is just the list of. So here's the headquarters, history. You have the Spanish, Mexican, Navajo Wars, reservation area, stock reduction, the coming out era, self-determination era. And I always remind people, and Navajos already know this, clans is just as important as getting someone's name because clans will determine who you are and how you relate to one another.
You take us back to the homepage and show us how they're related to.
In just a minute, I will. Government records.
This is the worst.
And the government took clans. In the archives, they have clans of the tribes of Indians, and you can have your clan go search way back.
We have different type of records by the government. Agency records, allotment records, annuity, census, correspondence, health records, school records, vital records. I remind people that the Navajo Nation is split up into different agencies, and the boundaries for that changes a couple times over the years.
So if you're in a border area,
You should look in both, yes.
be flexible.
Yeah, so if you live on a border of an agency, always look on both agencies. Here's a map of how it's split up. Superintendents, who are, you have sub-agents, agents, and superintendents. Sub-agents, you can see them as maybe like the Elders Quorum and the Relief Society president. The agents, more like the bishop, and the superintendent is like the stake president. And so that's kind of how the government splits up these, and they all have different records according to whoever's writing it. So we have Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, and you know, Arizona used to be part of New Mexico, so you'll have to look through New Mexico's superintendent records to get some past information. You have our favorite, the BIA. Different type of records you can find through the BIA. Census records. For those that always ask, well, how do I get enrolled? There you go. I'll let you guys worry about that. Indian census rolls. I threw these all up here.
You have the boarding schools, different boarding schools that they kept records.
And as a reminder, do not forget to check out local different tribes besides the Navajo censuses. Look at the Apaches, the Hopis, or Mokies at the time they were written, the Paiutes, the different Pueblos, the Utes, because sometimes they were living among each other or intermarried or adopted willingly or unwillingly. And so those are records that you need to keep in mind when you're looking for people. Like the Navajo Mountain people, I have to search the Paiutes sometimes, their records, to find people. Or my family from Tuba City, sometimes I have to look in the Hopi records. The U.S. population census records, other records. Here's some of the boarding schools, not all of them. There's, if they're highlighted, that means there's a link to on Family Search that talks about it a little bit. See, I don't even have Tuba City up here, and Tuba City should have one.
With the boarding school,
Oh yeah, it is at the bottom. So
you can get pictures, you know, of your parents that went
Yeah.
to boarding, the presidents, or what they did in sports, or all these things
Yeah.
for your own personal.
So I've had family members at the Chinle, the Fort Lewis, Fort Wingate, the Intermountain Indian School in Brigham City, the Lup, Phoenix, Pinyon, and Tuba City. But But there's a lot, like I said, there's a lot more than just these.
This site you're on, do you have a copy of that anywhere?
Yeah, online,
Yeah, what you're on, it's online.
FamilySearch.org.
Okay.
I remind people, military records, don't forget that. If you want military records, you have to do it like everyone else. There's no special way to do that. Newspapers. So here we have the, and it's not a complete list, but it's a start. So in Arizona, you have down in Phoenix, Arizona Republic. I even put the Lake Powell Chronicle up there. The Navajo Observer, Navajo Times, and so forth. The Winslow Mail. Religion. Each different group is coming to the reservation. They're producing their own records. How each of those individual groups share is different depending on who you get to. So
the Catholic Church is in different areas in the different communities.
yeah.
Each one might share it in a different way. There's not a uniform.
Well, it just depends on the person.
Oh, okay, so it's not
Yeah.
uniform. Okay.
State resources, things that are available through the state. The Arizona Department of Health, you can find birth and death certificates that are online. It's not a complete list, but it's a pretty good list. You can look at newspapers online. There's the Arizona Historical Society, different libraries that have different collections that can help. And I've put, it's like I said, it's not a complete list. It's still something being worked on. I just put these 4 states because that's where they reside, but other colleges and libraries and other places like this do carry stuff. Like I've even gone to Philadelphia to get family charts and stuff, which, you know, you don't really think of going to Philadelphia for Navajo stuff, but
Why were they in Philadelphia?
because that's where the lady donated her stuff.
Oh, okay.
There's not omission to all their records around
Mhm.
here.
Okay, I just like the Hopi donating theirs to BYU.
Mhm.
Okay, that's just, okay.
It's wherever they want to have it.
Okay.
I put some published stuff here. I'm really having a hard time keeping this under control with people. So code talker information, education, stories about education, just general history. I got rid of the encyclopedias that were on there. It was just garbage. Here's a couple on the land dispute, language. Oh, here's the Navajo Long Walk.
And it says the publisher there?
Let's see. No. So the middle one, Broderick. Yeah. He worked for the tribe, but I think he was working with Navajo Community College, and so that one is oral histories. So it has people who give their histories. The other one I don't have on there, so I'll have to go home and put it on there.
So you would contact Navajo Community College for information on them?
No, you can just hop on Amazon.com, buy it. They reprinted it, like a third-party company reprinted them, and so you could get a cheap reprinted copy, or you could just look for the original, which is always better.
I have one.
So here's some autobiographies and biographies that I put on there. There's let's see, Reclaiming the History, the Legacy and of Navajo Chief Manuelito and Juanita. There's Navajo Blessing Singer, the autobiography of Frank Mitchell. Wolf Killer, Wisdom of the 19th Century by the Witherells and Harvey Lake, and others. There's some on religion, on traders. I always tell people to look at the books by the traders because they usually start name dropping people. So that's always something fun. Back in the day, this Jeff Bowen decided to publish some of the Navajo censuses. He only got to a couple, and he put out a little book on it, but you could either buy that or just look it up for free. See, like someone threw on these oral histories of the Navajo livestock interview. I need to fix the link because the link they put in wasn't a good link. But there's oral histories of stuff like that. I threw on just generic Navajo websites for the Navajo Nation Library, the museum, and vital records and so forth. I put examples of what people have put online of their own Navajo genealogy, right there. So I applaud them for sharing that. I know a lot of Navajos don't like to put it up for everyone to see, but
Well, I noticed that Chief Loloma was my great-great-grandfather, and through going through the internet and everything, there was a lot of people that were related, and they gave their experiences, and we're all family. Just exciting.
it is. I wrote about him in my thesis
Have you so see?
so yeah. So like I tell people, this is just to get people started. So
It takes time. It's not rush. You take your time.
So this is just basic general information, and people go check it out, look it up. It should help you get started.
Again, you go to.
But once you get to the point where, okay, you've gotten the basic information and you start writing it out, then I have other stuff to help you go a step further to get more detailed information, to help support everything and make a bigger and better story. So, looks like I went over a little bit. We got the computer working. Let's take a couple minute break, like 5-minute break, and then we'll start up on the next little thing. Don't forget, if you have questions, like more detailed questions, the last hour of today is dedicated for nothing but questions. I'll be glad to answer anything I can. If I don't know the answer, I'll make it up.
You go to where you log into Family Search and come to this, just, okay.
It's right there at the top. The address.
So if you just go to the home page, you can just go to the one.
Yeah.
Okay. Here we are, FamilySearch.org. So here are the different boxes, drop-down boxes that are available that people will deal with. Family tree, memories, search. You're going to go to search. Down at the bottom is Wiki. So just regular FamilySearch.org. If you don't remember, just scroll over the 4 options. But search, because we're going to try to look for something. Go down to Wiki. It brings up this page. Here's our search box. You'll type in Navajo. And it brings up everything on Family Search that someone said about Navajos. So all of this, looks like there's quite a bit. There's 149, but we're just looking for the Navajo Indians, so.
So you could actually do that for other
Tribes. So let's do the Hopis. So I started on this. I tried to get rid of all the generic stuff. I haven't gotten very far. So I have a brief timeline. I have some records. Well, I didn't put the records on there. Someone put that on there. Agency, contact, reservation, Navajo, Hopi land dispute information, the different areas, the records that are available for censuses specifically. There's other records that are available that I haven't put on there yet. Enrollment information. Record Group 75, which is through the BIA, something that was associated specifically with Hopis. School information. So just...
And the Hopis were intermarried with the Tewa. I'm part Tewa. So they come from the New Mexico side of
Yeah.
that area.
Have you posted anything from the NAU oral history? Have you gone to that site yet? There's some.
Not yet.
Some good.
But yeah, there's them, there's ASU, there's U of A, UNM, there's the Historical Society in Arizona, the Historical Society in New Mexico, there's a bunch in Utah, and some in Colorado. Yeah, there's a lot of information out there.
I found an oral history on Betty Rogers, who owned Buck Rogers in Cameron. And I have her oral history. It's actually a video. I have downloaded that one.
I'll discuss some of the oral histories that are available. So someone was asking, this doesn't look like an LDS picture. If you ever been to Old Town in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, that's the church down there. It's I think it's one of the older churches, besides up in Santa Fe. While we're sitting here waiting. So this is my, let's see, me, my dad, my third great-grandma. People call her Long Salt. She's about 92 in this picture, and she's still out carting. She's cleaning wool too. Let's see if I can. This one was in Arizona Highway. Two of my cousins. They were just out herding sheep like everyone else. And the photographer, Barry Goldwater, was out and took a picture.
How did you find out who they were? Because in most of them, those pictures,
Well,
if you
because-
find them, it says two Navajo girls and
Well,
so-and-so.
when he would take pictures, he would give them a copy when he printed them out. And so,
So family had the pictures. And I think that's the biggest, my pet peeve is when I go on these websites and I see these
Just the
beautiful
generic-
pictures.
generic names or no names at all.
No names in it.
So like this one was through the railroad. I want to say through the Santa Fe, but it might have been Union Pacific. On the far right, the first lady I showed you, that's her son, Robert Longsalt, working on the railroad.
Where was that?
I don't know.
It's in the west.
Yeah.
See that mountain back there?
Yeah. So my Nellie, her husband and his second wife. They're from the Monument Valley area. Israel Bigman. So, just the little history nerd that I am, I pulling up magazines, looking at them that have history that everyone thinks is boring. But I'll go through and I love it, and it just turns out that we found a picture of my fourth great grandpa and a story about him. So, and none of us never seen a picture of him or anything. No one took a picture of him. So I was pretty excited. And this is a different photographer. So on the far right is Longsalt again. Then her daughter next to her, and then her granddaughter on the far left, and a daughter-in-law sitting with her back down away, and a great-grandson right there with Navajo Mountain in the background.
That's beautiful.
Here's Longsalt on the far left with her two sisters. All three of them married the same man. So he must have been, he must have had some money. Yeah, a lot of sheep, a lot of cows. They had, he was known for goats. He had a lot of goats.
Is this the Navajo Mountain area?
Yeah. And then those are from the Blue Salt area. Should recognize him. And he's in there with the family. Judge Max Little Salt, relative of Blue Salt. Here's the my 3 times great grandma again, and her sisters. This is Tom. I'm trying to remember what his English name was. It's not Laughter, it's Holiday.
John Holiday?
Is that Holiday?
John Holiday.
Yeah. And he fits into the family too. There's Robert Longsalt again. So the Longsalt lady, this is her brother. They say he's the one that found Rainbow Bridge.
And what was the brother's name?
He eventually went by Blind Salt. Blind. Oh, it's just so the same people again. Yeah, it's all this is my great-grandfather, Segi Begay. Yep, that's him. Supposedly, there's a huge picture down in Phoenix at a McDonald's or something. A different picture of him chilling on a horse, on a white horse. I haven't found the Phoenix yet, the McDonald's yet. So those are just some pictures. I brought a lot of pictures that if people eventually want to go through and look at right here. So during the next break.